Whoop, whoop. All right. How's it going out there in talent acquisition land? How are all my talent gurus doing? You are live on Shally's Alley. It is Friday, April 26th. Man, the year's going by fast. That is just crazy. I thought it was like April Fool's Day. It was just a few days ago. Now we're getting into May showers and all that fun stuff. But glad you're here. Thank you for joining us. I've got some good news. I have new equipment. Well, it's not new. It's an old microphone that I used to use when I did my professional studio recordings for the training that I used to do. But I've been able to kind of upgrade some other systems. So now I can be hands-free and no more weird headset with weird hair. So here we go. Let's give this puppy a try. We welcome today a very special guest all the way from Scotland. Where in Scotland are you?
Glasgow.
Glasgow.
The coolest city in the UK outside London.
All right. I like that. I gotta go. I haven't been. You never invited me to come. I need to get.
I'm sorry.
Get over there. Adam and I met at. We met in Amsterdam, didn't we?
That's right. Yeah. Unleash.
So.
Sorry, not Unleash. Sozu.
It was a while back. It was a long time ago. And at the time, Adam had just started a new company that took off and did some pretty amazing things. And since then, he's sold that company and started another company with a kind of interesting name. The name of your new company is Poetry HR. The last thing I associate with HR is poetry. So at some point, you're going to have to tell us how you came up with that. But this is pretty new. And the topic of discussion today is essentially recruiter enablement. I first heard of this job title from you, and when I was reading that, you sent me a job description, a sample job description, and I'm reading that job description. I'm like, hold on a second, that's like actually half of what my last job was. So I think this job existed for a long time, but it was never called anything specific. And now there's, I guess we're condensing into this thing called recruiter enablement or recruiting enablement or whatever. And I'm fascinated by it because I think it's something that has been sorely missed. For those of you that are listening and have no idea what I'm talking about, basically think of recruiter enablement as what we used to talk about when we talked about creating a center of excellence for recruiting, a place that holds all of your team's knowledge on landscape, marketplace, industry, company, culture, your tools, your systems, your templates. But it's more than that. And as I was reading this description, I was like, hey, I want to do that. Like when I grow up someday, I want to be that job. And here you are starting a company doing that. So first of all, let's start out with, how did you come up with Poetry HR? And then how did you have the idea to start a company to do just recruiter enablement?
So going back a few steps, I've been heavily inspired by sales and marketing. And, I started my career in recruitment in 1999. And throughout that time, I've really heavily studied what's going on in sales and marketing and, what can we learn from that? And what can we bring into
Looks like we have
selling our time for money.
A little bit of a glitch on the internet connection.
Yeah, sorry about that. My first company was really straightforward, selling our time for sourcing on LinkedIn, on the internet. It was a talent sourcing business. But the second one was very heavily inspired by sales and marketing. So Candidate ID was effectively Marketo for talent acquisition.
Right.
We created the world's first genuine marketing automation technology for talent acquisition. And as we were learning about that subject, I was looking at other technologies in sales and marketing going, actually, why don't we have that in recruitment? Why don't we have that in recruitment? Anyway, I was very inspired by
Sales enablement, right?
sales enablement.
That's actually,
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah. I was very inspired by sales enablement. I didn't know very much about it, but in the 10 months that I was at iSIMS, I spent a bit of time with the sales enablement team there. And I was really inspired by them, the processes that they went into, and I was inspired by the technologies that they were using as well. So I got introduced to a technology called HighSpot, and HighSpot is effectively a one-stop shop for salespeople who want to understand what is the best cold call script, what's the best in-mail messaging, what's the best way to overcome objections, what's the best way to generate interest through social media posts, what's the best way to structure that demo meeting, what's the best, like right from the cold call right through to closing the deal. And so if I'm a salesperson, I could go into a technology like HighSpot and it'll give me a paint by numbers. This is how to structure your deal.
Yeah, it's the
And
workflow, it's the process, it's the rules of the road, whatever you want to call it. It's the map.
it's the content assets and the calculators and the scripts and the props and the tools and the all in one place. So it's and as I was looking at this, I'm going, how do we enable recruiters? Do we give them all the things that they need? And I'm thinking to myself, we probably don't. I reckon we give them the ATO and we get on and fill the jobs. You know, that's what I did 100-hour research, focus groups, and so interviewed over 100 people last year for a YouTube channel on recruiter enablement, which thank you very much for joining me recently on the channel. I've interviewed 160 people on that now. And this was just like deep studying around the subject. And so, yeah, I mean, I decided in the same way that we created Candidate ID was Marketo for talent acquisition, what we're building now is HighSpot for talent acquisition. We're building a product which has got it's got over 30 solutions in there, and we split recruiter enablement up into 4 areas, 4 solution groups. The first is marketing, recruitment marketing. The second is recruitment operations. The third is recruiter learning, and the fourth is a little bit general, but it's tools. So MOLT, marketing, operations, learning, tools. And that's the acronym I use, MOLT, M-O-L-T. And almost everything that we want to try and do to enable our recruiters to do a better job is in marketing, operations, learning, or tools somewhere. So yeah, I mean, we really are repeating the process that we went through with Candidate ID, which was we're taking inspiration from an area of sales and marketing. We're really learning if the market wants it, contextualizing it for talent acquisition, and building it. And probably the most fun thing that we're doing is we're building this with the market. So we're not just making a guess that, oh, they would want it to do this, they'd want it to do that. We're literally saying, what do you want? And then we're building it. So
I mean, like I said, this is
it's a lot
a
of
job that
fun.
exists. It's just not, it wasn't called that, but we have, onboarding recruiters, training, all these pieces are out there, just not put together. And so I'm kind of guessing here, is that why poetry? Because it's like putting it all together in a way that is, concise and has a story, or what's the poetry?
It's actually not, but that would make sense. Poetry is because I've had a long held belief that recruitment is an art form, and specifically it's an art form all about words. If you get your words right, people take the action you want them to take because they feel a certain way. If you get your words wrong, they don't. Like sourcing messaging, as you know, is so important. The wording for your social media post, the wording for your job advert, the wording for how you respond to their question. It's all like an art form. And some people are really great with words and some people are not. And what we want is that every recruiter is great with words because they have the ability to go and collaborate within an environment with Shally and 10 other people, and she does brilliant messaging. To go post, I mean, outreach, I can go and make use of that. I can copy that, and I can be, as a colleague of Shally's, I can be operating at the same high level as Shally is. So that's why poetry, because it's an art form all about words.
Okay, it's an art form about words. Got it. All right, that registers. But yeah, so I get it. I think I was on the right track with
Yeah,
the poetry.
yeah, yeah.
But so
So,
let me ask you this: my challenge with this, what I'm having a hard time kind of wrapping my head around is who's responsible. Because and let me explain why I'm asking that. I'm a
yep,
consultant. I've been doing this 28 years, and I had a consulting firm, worked for a consulting firm, maybe working for a consulting firm in the future again. I get to talk to a lot of leaders at large and medium-sized companies that are building out or reengineering teams. And something that keeps coming up over and over again is center of excellence, or you know um, practice center, or whatever you want to call it.
yep.
But every time I've seen that try to be implemented, it's failed. And the reason it's failed is because there's no ownership.
Yep.
It's almost like you have to have I don't want to say dedicated employee. Maybe that is the solution. But if there isn't someone who has not just the responsibility of the oversight, but also of its continuity, it seems to just, if they build it, it exists for a year or three, and then there's a change in leadership, and boom, it's gone.
So, um, I want to respond to something you said a few minutes ago because it links to what you've just said. So I can kind of talk about these things both at the same time.
I can rewind. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you said, when I described the different sort of solutions that we're addressing, you said, a lot of these things exist. There's solutions for onboarding and the solutions for, well, but the problem is because we've built like over 30 things into the one workspace, that is saving recruiters a huge amount of stress from what we call toggle tax, which is the amount of time going from one tab to another tab to another tab, going on to Teams or any
Yeah.
anybody this
Who's got the password? Who's got the
one place,
contact? Yeah.
one one location for all of these different assets and how to get to all of your different tools and things from the one place, the one hub. That's something that we believe is saving recruiters about an hour a day. Now, who's responsible? When I started researching this about a year ago, I think there was about 100 people in talent acquisition teams with an enablement job title. Today, I think there's about 300. So it's still not a huge number of people, but it is definitely a growing trend. Why is it a growing trend? Because every organization in the world is under pressure to be more productive, to do more with less. We've got a global economic challenges. There's like high inflation rates. There's cost of living crisis, and most companies are trying to establish how do we make our people more productive and successful. And that's why sales enablement exists. That's why dev enablement exists. That's why there's other bigger functions than us in talent acquisition where this has been happening for a longer amount of time. So we in talent acquisition tend to not be the first to create. They happen in bigger business pain, and then we may follow some way down the line. But sales enablement is, I think, I don't see very much difference between the tasks involved in sales and marketing versus in talent acquisition. And I think sales enablement that as a growing trend over the last 5-6 years is something that really points to it, why it should be happening in recruitment as well. As I say, a year ago there was maybe 100 people.
Yeah.
Now there's about 300. It includes facets of rec ops. It includes facets of recruitment marketing. It includes facets of like what you described as center of excellence, absolutely, which can include a lot of sourcing type things.
Yeah, the libraries, the templates. Yeah. So I think what I'm hearing you say is the time has come, and although recruitment operations existed as a standalone job for a long time, and some of these other components, it hasn't all been brought together into a single housing format where you can say, okay, from the day we onboard a new recruiter or sourcer to the day that they are let loose if fully productive, we actually have a home for where they go to get efficient, to get productive. We have a place for them to go to instead of 20 places, and we have one person. So yeah, maybe the role of, maybe it is a dedicated job title. um, Fun fact, as a side note, when I started sourcing in 1996, that was not a job. I was a recruiter. That was my job title. It wasn't until 2 years later, in 1998, that I started reframing what I did, because it was no longer recruiting. I I was I wanted to distinguish myself from recruiting because I was only doing the front half or 2/3 of the process, and I was doing that for other recruiters. So it just seemed awkward that a recruiter worked with a recruiter to recruit candidates. And so I went out and tried to find a job title for this role. First evolution of it was cyber sleuth. That did not go over well. I found out later on there was another profession that had some dark notes to it that, yeah, it wasn't good. But um, yeah, around 2000-ish, maybe 99, 2000, 2001, the term sourcer came from a discussion that I had with a friend where we decided that what we do, which at this point there were maybe 10 of us, what we do is very similar to, in industry, the procurement of raw material. So if you are a car manufacturer, you need to buy steel, and that is called sourcing
Yeah.
of steel. So we're like, all right, well, there's an established job title that already exists. We're sourcing talent, just like you source steel or you source sugar for your candy or paper for your book. And that's where it came. So when I first started, there was maybe 10 of us that did the job, and none of us had the title. Soon after that, I was at the 100 mark. I started speaking all over the world, doing conferences and teaching about this, and explaining why it needs to be a separate function. That's the road you have ahead of you right now. And eventually it got to where I just woke up one day and on a whim checked LinkedIn to see how many people had the job title sourcer. Keep in mind, when I started on LinkedIn in 2005, there wasn't any. Right? There were people who had the title, but they just weren't on LinkedIn yet. So I just wake up one day and go on LinkedIn and check it, and it was 150,000 people that had that job title. And now, if you look, there's close to 1.5 million people in the world that have some form of sourcer or talent sourcing or talent scout, or talent researcher, and they have that job title. So I get what you're saying. It's pretty amazing how something blooms or blossoms like that and becomes a a job title. I mean, it's incredible. So
Yeah.
what you're saying is the time has come, and this is the way to solve this problem, is by having a dedicated function. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think that's correct. So if I think about like some of the people I know and how they've ended up with a recruitment enablement kind of job, and an example would be Haley Ennis, who works at Sprout Social. Her job is senior project manager, talent enablement, something like that. Haley started as a recruiter in there and was doing a lot of like side tasks. And because she was good at it, her boss started, "Hey, work on this. Could you take this
Mhm.
on?" And eventually said, I'm any more team would actually perform better if it was doing this full time. And so guess what? They went, you're absolutely right. It was like pitching a business plan, and they went, yeah, that's a good idea. Another example is Angelo Pancho, who works at Rockwell Automation. Same thing happened. He was working on projects at the side. Yeah, and he kept seeing more and more things. And then over a conversation with his boss, he pitched it, and they went, yeah, it's a good idea. We need somebody to do this. So that's
Somewhere
how.
along the line, somebody decided that a recruiter was going to stop carrying recs and start carrying other recruiters.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I mean, I think it's very clear. It's very clear that if I've got a team of 5 people filling jobs, and I take one of those away from filling jobs and help them to do nothing but make the other 4 more productive, that unit of 5 is going to be more successful. So because they're no longer
You
spending
know
time.
that this has been proven time and time again in a variety of settings. It's been proven in just-in-time manufacturing. It's been proven in recently in the last few years in military organizational theory and organizational structure with teams of teams, where you have teams of highly skilled operators that run autonomously to a certain degree and can make decisions in the field. There'll be one of the people in the team of 5 whose job it is to make the other 4 work better. That literally is their job. It happens with intelligence gathering or operations as well, in the way that they manage information gathering with all the different sources. I've studied this a lot, and I created the sourcing pod structure specifically on that, where you have someone who is in charge of organizing and keeping the workflow, but they're not anybody's boss. They're just the person you go to for workflow. So yeah, I totally get it. Are you going to tell me that someday people are going to go to school to study recruiter enablement, and they're not going to ever have been a recruiter? That's just going to be their job without having been a recruiter? Is that even possible?
I don't know. That's a great question. I mean, I think it's very possible. Yeah. I mean, I like.
It took me 25 years to do that, right? 20 years ago, if you said somebody's going to be a sourcer without having been a recruiter, I would have said, what? No way. You have to be a recruiter first. But nowadays, I see people whose career started in sourcing and continues in there. So they didn't have a job in recruiting before that. So maybe not now, but 20 years from now, or 15 or 10 years from now, somebody will start in recruitment operations and work their way into recruiter enablement without having carried a rec.
I mean, I think that is happening. I think that's definitely happening. And actually, I'm just checking somebody's LinkedIn before I actually out somebody as having done this. But I don't.
That they may not have started in that. Yeah. Okay.
I don't think. Yeah. I'm not sure that. I'm not sure if Nick Thompson ever was a recruiter. No, I think he might have been actually. Yeah, no, he was. I'm wrong. It was a long time back. There are. No, there's definitely people who have gone straight into rec ops, and enablement includes, like, I wrote a post on LinkedIn about 6 months ago, and I said, here's 64 things that you can, recruiter enablement tactics that you can easily just apply yourself. Do these things. I mean, that shows how many things are involved in this. A recruiter has, I think, the recruitment workflow. I saw the steps involved for BT, British Telecommunications, a few years ago, and there was like 72 steps involved in recruiting, and many of them there is an enablement response to make it a more productive thing.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, another example of like what we're trying to solve here is there was one of the focus groups I did last year where there was a talent acquisition manager joined the call, and she said that day she'd identified 3 of her recruiters had posted the same job advert in 3 different countries, and they'd all written them themselves. One of them was good, one of them was okay, and one of them was bad. But I mean, like, three people writing the same job advert on the same day doesn't seem like a very productive,
No,
you
doesn't.
know.
Right. That's where streamlining and process optimization and all those things can be a part of recruiter enablement. So yeah, I totally get it. Um, and I think so. Angela is saying that it's best, doesn't mean it's required, but it's best to have a background in recruiting, so they know the entire recruitment cycle, the technologies, the hiring manager, the candidate mindset. But let me tell you, Angela, while you are correct, I would also add that I know lots of recruiters who have been recruiters in full life cycle for many years and have no clue what the technology is. So just because they were a recruiter doesn't mean they know the technology, or just because they are a recruiter doesn't mean that they necessarily know, the operations or even the law. I ask this question a lot of recruiters when I'm meeting with them or interviewing them, working with them as a consultant. I ask how familiar are they with the 7 different regulatory bodies that are able to levy fines, and in one case actually um, imprison people based on errors and omissions in recruitment. And most people can only name one, not 7. So it's a lot more than that. So I totally agree with Angela. I think having the background is good, but I think also defining the job is better. So the background and then the job, so that you can understand really what the job description of this, the structure, so you can understand what's all involved. A lot of companies don't have a workflow. They just don't. They don't have a process. Every recruiter does their own thing. They have an ATS or a CRM and an ATS, but there's no rule that says this is how you open a rec. None of that is written down anywhere. So gone are the days of like the employee handbook being the reference, right? So I guess this is that. This is the recruiter handbook, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I also agree with Angelo. I think it probably is best to have a background in recruiting,
Agree.
but again, at the same time, like one of the guys that I learned sales enablement from, who at iSIMS, he didn't have a background in sales enablement before doing that job. He had a background in business operations, and he was a problem solver, and he asked questions, and he listened, and he came up with good answers. And incidentally, I really believe that people with a sourcing background are excellent for recruiter enablement, because they they look under every rock. If that doesn't work, they try that. If that doesn't work, they try that. They're constantly looking for better ways of doing things, and they've got the right curious mindset to do this type of thing. In fact, you and I have had this conversation, I think, before around like the concept of prompt engineering, and why sourcers are good for that as well. Because while it's not the same, some people say it's the new Boolean. It's not the same as Boolean, but it is about iterating, trying different things, seeing what works,
Yep.
having patience. And I think the whole recruiter enablement subject is something that talent sourcers are very well set up for in terms of mindset.
How different is this mindset between, and I'm only asking you this because you live in a tiny little island on the other side of the pond. How different is it between the nations? Um, Here in America, in the United States, we think everybody does things the same way we do, but you don't have to go very far, i.e., Canada or Mexico, to quickly realize that recruiting is done quite differently, not just because of laws and regulations, but culture and everything else. And if you go all the way to the other side of the world, it might feel like an English speaking country, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, but things are very different there, aren't they? So how big is the mindset difference? Are are
I,
other nations more likely to adopt this, or less likely, or is there a different resistance? Tell me about that.
yeah, I mean, look, I've got um, I'm probably not going to go through my hierarchy of countries, but there's a big difference
In like
between.
sophistication from one
Yes,
to another? Yeah.
yeah, there is a very big difference in
Yeah, I
levels of
know that. Yeah.
sophistication from one country to another. And I think that up at the top is the UK, the Netherlands, and parts of the United States.
Yep.
I think beneath that, there are the Scandinavian countries are kind of close by. Australia is kind of close by. There's a big, big gap. I'm really sorry, France, but you're quite far behind. Germany, you're quite far behind.
Yep. Yep.
Italy and Spain, you're like nowhere near.
Is that an
So
advantage or a disadvantage? Are these organizations going to maybe like leapfrog over some of the learning pains that we went through and go
no,
directly
no,
to enablement, or are they going to go through the
no.
same growing pains?
No, they'll go through the same growing pains. They might be able to do it a bit faster because they've got other countries to
Right.
follow. But at the same time, it's very clear that there's very little difference between the UK and parts of the USA. And
Mhm.
when I say parts of the USA, it's the East Coast, the West Coast, Chicago, and bits of Texas.
And
Pretty
sometimes
much.
by industry, yeah, I know what you mean. It's a
My
it's a big space. So
Yeah,
yeah.
my like I'm not spending time talking to people in Kentucky. So, there's certain places where my customer base, my market is pretty much international enterprise companies. There is no difference between the UK and the USA on that. It's pretty much exactly the same processes, and it's very, very regular. Where I could be in a meeting with customers of mine or prospects of mine, and there's people from both sides of the Atlantic in the
Mhm.
in the meeting.
In
That
some
might
in some agreement, in like not at odds with each other.
No, not at odds with each other at all.
Right.
No,
Right.
absolutely not. And they're in the same they're in the same team. They are in the same team. Just one of them happens to be in the UK, and one of them is in the States, and one of them is maybe in the Netherlands or something like that. As has happened very recently. In fact, one in a couple of Germany as well. But yeah, there's limited difference in international companies. Interestingly, the ATS that they're on signifies where they're likely to be with this subject in two ways. If they've got a really good ATS, they've probably already got a SharePoint site and they've already tried to do some things, and
Mhm.
they're the ones that are more likely to have, if they're on iSIMs or smart recruiters or something like that, they're probably more likely to have made some efforts in this area. If they're on Workday or SuccessFactors or Oracle, they probably know that they need to do more in this space because, if they don't have a best of breed ATS, they've probably got the kind of feature starved, and therefore, they need more ways to enable their recruiters. Also, if they're in tech or healthcare as an industry, they're probably further ahead than other industries because they
The
have
need, just the need, right? The demand on those makes sense.
exactly in
Yeah.
demand talent, harder to hire, really hard to hire marketplaces for the last 10 years. It might be a bit easier to hire software engineers than it was 2 years ago, but it's still not easy.
It's
And
not
it's
easy.
not easy in tech or healthcare to hire people. So I think that they have had to look for more better solutions, right across from sourcing through to assessing people and
Yeah.
gamifying stuff. And they've had to innovate faster than other industries.
So let me pull a couple of threads that I'm curious about. Just kind of you and I have had many uh, positively heated discussions about different pieces of this, because when Candidate ID first started, I told you I was heavily involved with a product that did exactly that. 5 or 6 years before then, it was built with Drupal, and
Yeah,
I was
you said, I
sure
remember. I
that you were
remember.
doing this because I couldn't wait for somebody actually to do it in recruiting. And we didn't quite see eye to eye in some spaces because I had come at it from a different way. So that I like to kind of pull Socratically, right? Not in
Yeah,
not
yeah,
in a
sure.
defensive or dangerous way, but just very Socratically. Um, I get marketing, totally recruitment marketing, very well established. Recruitment operations, very well established. It starts to fall apart with me on learning. Um, I've made millions of dollars teaching recruiters how to source and teaching recruiters how to recruit, but it is a very difficult business because most companies don't have a dedicated budget, and in many cases they don't even consider, they have no problem sending salespeople to a training conference every 6 months, but they don't want to send recruiters to a webinar that costs $40. So if learning is part of recruiter enablement, how are we going to overcome the fact that essentially recruiting and talent acquisition hates learning? I mean,
Yeah,
they don't want to do it. They don't want to pay for it. That's going to be a gap, isn't it? How do we
yeah,
deal with that?
yeah. It's a very, very good point. So uh, I'll tell you what we've tried to do. So I believe that, and a lot of people are gonna like, a lot of real like experts in particular areas of recruitment are gonna hate what I'm saying here. There are It is difficult to turn more than like 10% of recruiters in the world into brilliant talent sourcers or good recruitment
Yeah,
marketers
agree.
or good assessors
Yeah,
or that type of thing, right? And there's some
but you're a
companies,
soccer fan, right? You know that a
yeah,
soccer team isn't made up of 11 strikers.
yeah, but the thing is, I think the difference, the soccer analogy, to me, the soccer analogy doesn't quite work because in the context of a team of 50 people who are all recruiters, and they're all doing like a 360-degree recruitment job, which is still the case in a lot of companies. Those people need to be good sources, and they need to be good recruitment markets, and they need to be good at a lot of different things. But when you can train them and train them and train them, they're
You
not.
either play behind midfield or in front of midfield. It's you play to your strengths.
Well, my I think my where I'm getting to here is, if you can literally spoon feed people with Boolean strings
Yep,
and with messaging and with X-ray, you know,
I get what you're saying.
and
Right, if you can build
if
it
you can
for
just
them, then
exactly,
they need to become specialized in marketing or tools utilization because it's yeah, I gotcha.
exactly. So one of the things that I've been really trying to do is I'm not trying to educate them so that they become amazing sourcers or amazing recruitment marketers. I'm trying to give them like 80% of the things handed to them on a plate. And if we can do that,
Oh,
then
this
it
is
levels people out.
meta. I think the light bulb just went on. This is really meta. You're not recruiter enablement or talent enablement or whatever, talent acquisition enablement is not going to be the learning and development department. It's going to be the department that teaches how learning and development is done for recruiting. So, in other words, you don't have to be the teacher, you just have to teach people how to learn.
Well, we kind of, in a lot of cases, we just skip the learning and try and give them the answer.
If
Um,
possible, right? But then you
yeah,
have to make it easy for them. So, for example, if I gave you a copy of my book, you can pick up my book and you can
yeah,
read it front to back,
yeah,
and the next day become a recruiter and a sourcer and do the
yeah,
job.
yeah,
But you're not going to be one of the top 10%. However, it it requires one thing. It requires that you read it.
yeah.
And the problem that I see is that companies buy training, they send their recruiters to a training boot camp or whatever, and they don't read the book.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's say there's 10 recruiters in a team, and they've all read they've all been on your training. They've not read the book. They understand what a Boolean string is, but actually, are they ever going to practice it? No, they're not. So
Some are. One of
if they
them might.
okay, like maybe three of them might, three of the
Or
10
yeah.
might, seven will never do it.
Yep.
So what are they? Are they never going to do Boolean strings or sourcing?
First of all,
Right.
do they have to? Because that's the first question.
Well, yeah, that's another question, absolutely. But on the so trying to provide them with DIY solutions rather than training them how to do it. That's one of the things that we're doing. The other thing is
Okay, I like
we're
that.
not, we're not trying to be social talent
Click to enable.
or yeah, yeah, exactly. We're not trying to be social talent or talent sandbox. We're certainly not in the area of like
Training.
performance skills. No, absolutely not. And that sort of stuff is great. We have created one solution for here's how to use Workday. Here's how to use your CRM. Here's how we do assessment. Here's how we do advertising. Here's our recruitment KPIs. But this is all about specifically with your team. So here's how to use the CRM. Here's how our company does diversity. Here's how our company does inclusive hiring. But it's all templated. It's like, here's the 22 cards. Your team fills in the 22 cards so
Battle
that
cards,
anybody
yeah.
new that joins us, so that anybody new joins
Sales,
the
they call it, by
team.
the way, folks. It's sales. That's called battle cards. If you're not familiar with that.
So here's how you, yeah, exactly. It's like, here's all the so that, like, in an RPO context, for example, I'm moving from one account onto another account. When I move on to that second account, I don't need 3 weeks to learn it all. I need about an hour to go through these cards, and I'm going, right, okay, I now know most of the things I need to get on with my job on this account. Or if I'm a contractor moving into a TA team, I can pick it up really quickly because I've got that learning within my enablement system. But it's definitely, it's not to do with, it's certainly not about the type of, talent
So
sandbox
I
or
think
that type of
let
stuff.
me rephrase. So it's not about the material for learning. It's not about the training. It's not about the development. It's about knowing where to get the stuff that you need in order to do your job. So if I were to essentially summarize kind of the recruiter enablement role that you're envisioning, the main goal is to make sure that the recruitment team has everything they need to be able to find and hire the best possible candidates for their company. And the recruiter enablement acts as a support system for the system of recruiting, providing them with the resources, the tools, the guidance, and also the direction of where to find it. So, there may be 100 hours of recorded video of people doing things and showing other people how to do things. They might have even bought training, and it's all in a library somewhere, but people don't know how to get to it. So, the part of the job isn't creating those trainings. It's putting them somewhere in a way that it can be found when you need it at the time that you need it, like just in time availability of required resources. Is that more like it?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I'm sorry, I might have said something slightly confusing. In terms of, I think it definitely, recruiter enablement definitely includes all of that performance learning and training
Mm-hmm.
stuff. It does include making sure that people understand how to do everything. What we've built within our product in
Oh, gotcha.
poetry, that's not about that. But that
Got it.
would be
Right. That
there would
plugs
be a,
in. I get it now.
yeah, exactly. There would be a launcher in there. There would be a launcher within poetry to open up Talent Sandbox, or to open up Social Talent, or to open up shallysteckrell.com, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a hub for your learning. And the practice of recruiter enablement and that job may well include training people. Absolutely.
Or
It's,
acquiring the training or organizing existing training or
Yes, exactly. Making sure that the right experts are brought in to do it. Yeah, and just to go back to, like, I think I said this earlier, but one of the things that recruiter enablement we're trying to really eliminate is the number of times that people are on Teams or on Slack going, "Can anybody tell me how I can find whatever it is?" Because they should be able to find it in the one place. It should be easy for them to access. One goal of recruiter enablement is definitely reducing the time to find the things to get your tasks done.
yep. Speed, efficiency. Okay. So thanks for pulling that thread with me. The other one, as I mentioned, there were two. The other thread that I want to pull on a little bit is tools.
Yeah.
And let me explain why that's a loose thread for me. Almost every organization that I've worked with has a tool stack, technology stack that is in some way, shape, or form at conflict with itself. Either overlapping functions and tools, or gaps that both or all the tools don't meet, or tools that are acquired for purpose A but then are utilized for purpose B, or they're acquired and they're not utilized. So everything from the very decision of what tools to buy is, I think, outside of the realm of enablement, because I think enablement, from what I learned in the Peace Corps when I was trained by the best to use appropriate technology to help a community in need, that couldn't afford, the technology, right? So we call that appropriate technology. The biggest lesson, the biggest takeaway from that is use what you have. So I think recruiter enablement is about, what do you have? Let's use that, versus let's go buy a bunch of stuff. So when it comes to tools, doesn't it fall apart a little bit, because they're most companies are just not, let's just face it, they're not utilizing the tools they have. I've never met an organization with a LinkedIn recruiter account that has full utilization or even half utilization.
Yeah, absolutely. And look,
And
the
that's the
applicant,
single most used tool and the single most expensive tool in our arsenal, and yet it's drastically misused and underutilized.
yeah, no, I agree. I agree. And I think that your applicant tracking system, companies don't use the functionality that's within that. There's loads of things that don't get used. Same with your CRM.
So the ATS doesn't have contact management, they buy a CRM. The CRM doesn't have recruitment marketing, so they buy a recruitment marketing. The recruitment marketing doesn't have background checking, so they buy a background checking. That background checking doesn't have reporting, so they buy reporting. The reporting doesn't have visualization, so they buy visualization. And so now you have 7 tools, and you got to export data from one to the other using CSV files because they don't talk to each other. How is that
yeah,
implement?
yeah. So a
That's
couple
this.
of no, there's a lot of I've got a lot of comments on this. So the first thing is that I think it depends on the size of the team, and often, like a lot of those platform type decisions around technology, that'll sit with it. If your team is told you are using Workday, Oracle, or SuccessFactors,
Right?
you've got no. That's the CFO's
That's what you're
decision,
going to use.
right?
Now here's
That,
how to use it.
yeah, that's the CFO's decision, and so um, there is sometimes a rec ops team, and that rec ops team's job is definitely platform technologies. It includes how to optimize the ATS that we're using,
Yep.
what are the gaps, and what else do we need that is like team wide. And so I think, and all of the data decisions and things like that, that all sits with rec ops. Now the difference is, rec ops typically is interfacing with like other teams within the business, with finance, with information technology, with other teams, and their job is to make sure that recruitment is playing nicely with all the other data, um, like people that need data in the organization. Enablement sometimes sits within recruitment operations.
Okay.
It sometimes is a stepchild. Sometimes it is their task, and sometimes there's people within Rec Ops who focus on enablement. Now, enablement
So
will
the recruiter says, "Hey, I've never worked on this position before. We've never hired for a data scientist. This is our first one. How do I go about finding them, or where do I go?" Like the recruiter enablement person then says, "Okay, the best tools that we have for that are these 3."
it could be, yes. It could be that they're
Or
advising the
here's a
recruiter.
formula for finding these, or that kind of thing.
It could be the recruiter. It could be the person in recruiter enablement is advising on the right tools for specific recs. It will also be the recruiter enablement person's responsibility to evaluate what are we lacking in terms of tools and what is out there that we could go and buy. It might also be that person's job to evaluate what are all the repetitive tasks that recruiters are doing that they don't enjoy doing, the administrative things that are just, it's got to be done over and over. And is there a solution within our existing tech stack, or is
Do we
there
have
anything
it?
out there in the
Okay,
market, or should we go and buy something?
got it.
I think so. In terms of tools, what we've done is we've got 30 solutions within the one workspace in Poetry, and some of those are tools where recruitment teams don't have access to them. We've created them fresh because we know that there's things that recruiters are doing they don't want to be doing, and there's a tech solution for it.
Really? No, don't say that.
Some others are versions of tools which already exist,
Got
but
it.
the benefit is we're bringing it into one workspace. So if a team there is a clear trend in every corporate function to reduce the tech stack, reduce the number of things in the tech stack. Now, some of that does come with getting technology which does lots of things good enough, and actually the whole best of breed for 30 different solutions,
Yeah.
that's not something a company or an individual wants anymore. So if they're buying our product, they still might not use it for all of the things that we offer,
Yeah.
because they might want best of breed for, I don't know, diversity related like content or something like that. So they might want to contain text you for something like that. But good enough for 30 things in the one place, we think is a very, very big win because of the
Okay.
amount of time that it's saving people from toggling around all the different things that they've
Yeah,
got.
that's a time waster right there.
It
So
is.
we've got a few minutes left, and there was a very big question I wanted to ask you, which is we've now, this is going to go out to a lot of people. Many of them probably have no idea about this kind of movement going on. So now they're going to be. We've just whet their appetite. We gave them an appetizer, or even worse, we let them smell the sizzling food, but that they can't have any of it. So if someone is going to start doing this today,
Yeah.
what are the top three? Let's limit it to that. What are the top three pitfalls to avoid? What are the top three goof ups that are going to trip them up to look out for? What are the top three things that they should be on the lookout so that they don't go down the wrong path?
You know, I've interviewed 160 people for my Recruiter Enablement YouTube channel, and I always ask them questions like that. And I get so many great responses back. The one that I've learned, which I think is by far the most important one, I mean, I've got one and I've got 300.
Okay,
So,
let's do one.
so
I'd like
I'm going
that.
to I'm going to do the one, right? The one is, do not put things in place because you think it's a great idea from your experience as a recruiter.
Yes.
Every single recruiter looks at the world in a different way. And it's really important to ask people. You might say to them, "Hey, I've had a problem with this as when I was a recruiter. What do you think about it?" I used to find this quite difficult when I was a recruiter. What about you? What do you think? Get them to tell you what their challenges are. Do it in focus groups. Go one to one to the individuals. Get them to tell you what needs to be better, and then focus on that. Don't set out a big plan of 50 things you're going to go and try and make better without getting the recruiters to tell you what they want. At least include them. If you're going to do some of your own things, that's fine, but at least include their perspectives on it. And something that was a problem for you might not be a problem for the rest of the people in the team.
Yep.
Something that you thought was good, everybody else might hate it and
Here's the
find it
thing,
really
what you just
inconvenient.
said is important because every single recruiter is right and every single recruiter is wrong. And so if you do
True.
what they all want, you'll be pulling the ship in every single direction, which reminds me of one of my favorite quotes by General Omar Bradley. It's time we steer by the light of the stars, not by the light of every passing ship. So, in other words, figure out what the correct path is, set your compass to that point, and steer that way instead of trying to steer by the advice of everyone that's like, oh, let's go over here, let's go over there, let's go over here. So, yeah, I think that's a really critical um, and very insightful answer to the how not to screw this up. Thank you.
Alongside that, I mean, I would say alongside that, the other one, of course, is you do need to understand what is the uh, what is the chief people officer's vision for the future of your business function. So if their vision is You know, something's going to be different in 2 years' time, and you're spending all of your time optimizing the status quo, you're kind of putting yourself, you know, you're attaching yourself to the old way of doing things.
Right. That's
So
not change. That's just
exactly. I mean, if, for example, your chief people officer and therefore your VP of talent acquisition are planning to move to a business partnering model, or they're planning to move to a 360-degree model, or they're planning to move all the TA to Mexico, or whatever it is, you really want to try and understand what is in the plans so that what you're optimizing for aligns with what they visualize for the future. I think that will do your career a lot of good.
yeah. You've inspired me to write an article. I'll let you know if I end up doing that. We are out of time, and every one of my guests is equally punished by the severity of this last request, which is first, who should be our next guest?
um, right, who should be your next guest? This is entirely self-serving, and it should be Holland McHugh, and the subject should be recruiter enablement. Why? Because Holland has done it from inside at Delta Airlines and
Okay.
at Red Hat and at Smart Recruiters. She's dedicated very much from the talent attraction kind of
Mhm.
angle, but more recently, more holistically as well. So
I
I'm
will
sorry
ask.
to be.
Doesn't mean she's going to want to be on my show. So maybe I put in a good word for me. Um, but I would definitely ask. That's great. That's great. So I got that check. The second part of this is, what do you want our listeners to think about over the weekend? Not I'm not trying to get preachy and tell them what to think, but what question to ask themselves.
I think anybody listening to this should ask themselves, if you're a recruiter or you're a recruiting leader, you should be thinking about, are recruiters in your team doing things that they probably shouldn't be doing because they are repetitive administrative tasks that actually, or that they don't necessarily have. I'm going to start again, right? I'm going to start again with my answer to this question. Are your recruiters collaborating effectively on things like outreach messaging and email copy and objection handling messages and things like that? If not, you don't have to use poetry for this. Poetry is like the supercharged way of doing this, but you could use a SharePoint for it, or you could use a
All right, so
Google site for it.
okay.
You know,
So
so
are they collaborating effectively? Find out. Ask yourself that. Okay.
And if the answer is, if you've got people sitting next to each other who are repeating the same tasks that each other's doing, that's a bad use of their time.
Yeah. Driving over the same threads. Okay. Well, this has been fabulous, enlightening, very entertaining, and has even led to a possible blog post. So thank you so much for giving us an hour of your time in your evening. I'm sure it's past dinner time over there, or as you would say, supper time.
I'm actually leaving the house right now. Very, very unusual for me to go out on a Friday night, but I'm actually going out with some friends for dinner, like right now.
Cheers. All right. Then I will leave you to it. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We will see you on here in Shally's Alley next week. We have Carl Cutsmode as our guest. Until then, be kind